Hello and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be talking about peptides, almost every single one. So if you're like, what about QRS, HPV, 2169? Just leave me alone. This is the best I could do for now. Maybe I'll save that one for a different video. So peptides sit in this weird middle ground. Some people treat them like miracle drugs, like they're the best thing on earth. Others dismiss them without really understanding them, saying they're a waste of money and don't do too much. Both extremes miss this point. And the core idea of this video that you should remember throughout this entire thing is that peptides are signals. They are not going to be solutions. Since they are signals, they are going to amplify what already is going on in your body. They're not going to override terrible sleep, bad training, being an idiot, being really stupid, or having a bad metabolism. So a better question than what peptide should I take is, what problem are you trying to solve? Is a peptide even the right thing to do for your specific situation? And this video is for education only. There's no dosing, no protocols. There is no link in my bio telling you to buy random peptides for 10% off that are made in some dude's basement on a gray market website. I do feel like overall the peptide industry is very not genuine. You have the one extreme of a random 20-year-old telling you retatrutide is the best thing ever. Meanwhile, they look ethnically ambiguous because they took too much melanotan too, and you're too distracted wondering what ethnicity they are. On the other end, there are random dudes who are recording in their car. You're like, how did you even get into peptides? You look like you're just a random dad. Meanwhile, they have wire transfer information in the link in their bio, and you're just wondering what's going on. So I'm always going to keep it real. If a peptide sucks, I'm going to tell you it sucks. Some of them are expensive. Some of them truly are ass. They don't do too much, but some are good, and it really depends on the situation that you're in. So let's begin, and I will try to hold off on a lot of the ranting. So again, what are peptides? They are short chains of amino acids. That's it. They are literally short chains of amino acids. If there are longer chains of amino acids, they become protein, like the protein that you're eating in your food. But they are small little things that act as messengers. They are not building blocks. They're not like TRT, testosterone, or any other steroid. They are not going to stimulate growth. They're not going to add tissue like hormones do. They're more so going to influence existing pathways. Their effect is going to depend on your receptor sensitivity, your baseline health, and the environment that you drop the signal into. So really with a lot of this stuff, natural versus unnatural is kind of a useless debate because there's really no fine line. If you're making your life a little bit better, optimizing what your body already produces, is that unnatural or is it natural? You know, it's an unnatural hormone, but you're using natural processes. You're not overhauling things like growth hormone or any of those other things. So that's an aside. And compared to supplements, peptides are going to be more targeted. But again, compared to hormones, they're going to be a lot more subtle and conditional, and that subtlety is why they're interesting and why people often get very disappointed. So I've been talking a lot about how there's a wide range of what you can expect with peptides, and results are all over the place. You know, the same peptide could be a wildly different outcome for a certain person. And this isn't really a mysterious thing. Common reasons results can look dramatic are the placebo effect. This is very real, something called regression to the mean, or an injury or an issue already improving whether you added the peptide or not, for example, like an injury. If you add in the chaos from terrible sourcing, random dosing, because there's no real trials on a lot of these things, and stacking 5 things at once, you kind of don't really know what's going on. So again, peptides amplify momentum. They're not going to fix your broken systems. They're going to make dysfunction louder, not better. So before we talk about the peptides themselves, here's how you should think about peptides. Don't think about it as individual peptides. Think of them as systems they influence. So in the broad buckets of things that we're going to go over, there are the tissue repair peptides, the growth hormone axis peptides, metabolism and body composition, cognition, immune modulation, and mitochondrial function, the good old powerhouse of the cell. Each bucket is going to have different risks, different costs, different expectations, and different people that they make sense for. So let us start with the recovery and tissue signaling peptides. Starting with BPC-157, the most famous peptide online, which, might be a red flag depending on how you look with it. BPC-157 is going to be associated with tissue repair signaling, angiogenesis, which is the creation of new blood vessels, and inflammation modulation. So why do people use BPC-157? People use this for recovery and injury repair. Like I said, tissue repair signaling, angiogenesis, building more blood vessels to shuttle nutrients to fix that injury. Most of the data we have on BPC-157 is animal data, and a lot of people use this mistakenly. I see people like, yo, I'm running BPC-157. This is my peptide stack. And I'm like, oh, are you injured? Like, what are you trying to recover from? And I'm like, no, I just use BPC for recovery. BPC is going to work best when there is an actual injury signal. It amplifies repair that is already happening. If there's no injury, there's no signal to amplify. It's not going to be a performance enhancer. It's not going to be a fix for bad mechanics or training. So I do think this is helpful after surgeries, Athletes after like an ACL repair, trying to recover a little bit more quickly to get back into the season. Nagging shoulder injuries, nagging hamstring issues, things like that. If you're already feeling pretty good, this is probably going to be a waste of money for the most part, unless some of the other use cases where you're recovering from stimulant abuse or other drugs, there are some modulatory pathways that help with that. Now for TB500. This one's often lumped with BPC, but it has a bit of a different behavior. This one is more about cellular migration, so bringing the right tissues and right cells to where they need to be, usually in the context of healing, and of course tissue organization during repair. Compared to BBC, this one's going to feel a little bit more systemic. So this is like general body healing, still some injury context dependence, but it's going to be a little bit more systemic than BPC versus, BPC, you have a knee injury, let's inject BPC, and it'll go to the knee sort of thing. You'll often find BPC and TB in blends where they're just, the healing stack, put it all together, hopefully induce some healing, but it isn't going to meaningfully improve recovery in healthy people. Again, this is going to be something for specific injury and inflammation and tissue recovery. Next, we have GHK copper. This is in two different conversations. There is the topical for skin and hair, and there's going to be the systemic repair and remodeling factor of it. GHK copper is not going to be a growth factor, but it is going to influence gene expression subtly. As a result, a lot of the benefits you might see on this are for your skin and hair. Hair is going to grow a little bit more thicker, a little bit nicer, better texture. Same thing with your skin, better complexion, smoother, reduction of some wrinkles, but it's not going to be dramatic. And this is one thing that people run it for 2 to 3 months, don't see anything, wasted a couple $100, and they're like, this doesn't do anything. With GHK copper, you have to run it for a bit of a long time. I haven't used it myself, but I do hear the injections are a little bit painful. So it's not really a high bang for your buck type peptide. In my opinion, this is going to be like a long-term adjunct, not really going to be a dramatic tool. This is definitely one of those ones where people might say, it doesn't really work. But it can. Next, we have KPV, which is an anti-inflammatory signaling peptide. This one's derived from alpha MSH, and its primary role is in immune and inflammatory modulation, particularly at the gut and the skin level. Most of the interest around KPV comes from conditions where inflammation is the bottleneck, not tissue damage itself. So it's not going to accelerate tendon healing. It's not going to rebuild tissue. It's going to bias inflammatory signaling toward resolution. So for an example, in the context of gut inflammation, certain dermatologic conditions, immune-driven irritation, this can be meaningful. And where people get confused is lumping KPV with BPC or TB500s. Those peptides are around repair signaling. KPV is quieting inflammation so normal repair can occur without excessive immune interference. It's going to be very subtle, very narrow, context-specific. So really in situations where inflammation is the limiting factor, KPV can help, but if it isn't, another one that you probably won't notice too much. Now we have melanotan 2. So this one kind of sneaks in with some of the recovery peptides, mostly because it acts on the same melanocortin system as some of the other anti-inflammatory peptides. Reputation is honestly built on a lot of side effects, not necessarily tissue repair. So melanotan 2 is a melanocortin receptor agonist. Its most obvious effects are going to be increased melanin production, aka when you use it, you get really tan, appetite suppression, and changes in libido, meaning changes, in the positive sense. It could be negative. You have an increased libido is what I'm trying to say. A lot of people call this the Barbie drug because it makes you tan, skinny, and high sex drive. Those aren't really going to be recovery effects. There are some anti-inflammatory pathways that can come with this and melanocortin signaling, which is why it occasionally is like a recovery or resilience compound, but it's kind of, secondary effects. But what is consistent are these side effects. Nausea, blood pressure changes, flushing after injection, appetite disruption, which isn't really great if you are trying to bulk, and most of the appetite disruption is from the nausea, and just generally unpredictable systemic responses. There are people that use melanotan, they go tanning, and then they look, a little bit more tan over the course of a few days, and then one day they wake up and they are dark. It can really kick in just like that. So really, with melanotan 2, your mileage may vary, but you will become very tan. Now we have the growth hormone axis peptide. This category is probably more legitimate, but also pretty misunderstood. First off, we have sermorelin. Sermorelin is basically a growth hormone releasing hormone analog. Its job is to tell the pituitary in your brain, yo, release some more growth hormone. That signal only matters if the pituitary is capable of responding. If you're missing your pituitary gland, it's not going to do anything. So in situations where you're really old and your pituitary is not producing a lot of growth hormone to begin with, you're sleeping like crap. Most of your growth hormone is produced when you sleep. If you're not sleeping, not going to produce growth hormone. If your insulin sensitivity is terrible or your overall metabolic health is bad, it's going to determine whether this works or not. In younger or other metabolically healthy people, sermorelin can meaningfully increase endogenous GH pulses, but in older people, insulin-resistant individuals, response is going to be blunted. This is why outcomes are going to vary so much with some of these growth hormone-releasing peptides, and why some people feel great and why some people feel nothing. Now we have CJC 1295. There are the DAC options versus the non-DAC. This one is also a growth hormone-releasing hormone analog. Its job is going to be pretty simple again. Tell the pituitary, release some more growth hormone. And the real difference here is the DAC and no DAC. DAC stands for Drug Affinity Complex. It's a chemical modification that makes the peptide bind to blood proteins so it stays active a bit longer. CJC no DAC delivers a short signal. It's going to nudge your GH system and then gets out of the way. CJC with DAC is going to deliver a prolonged signal. It's going to keep stimulating the axis for an extended period. This is going to matter because growth hormone is naturally pulsatile. It is not constantly high. Your body's going to release it in bursts, again, largely tied to sleep and your circadian rhythm. So the appeal of no DAC is that it's more closely going to mimic the natural pulsatility. You're going to be supporting your existing GH pulses rather than stretching that signal into something the body doesn't normally do. The appeal of DAC is going to be that it creates a more sustained growth hormone and IGF-1 signaling. It sounds pretty good, but longer signaling isn't automatically better. At some point, you're no longer enhancing your body's physiology, you're just changing it altogether. So again, one's not better than the other. It's really more so how much intervention does your system actually need. Short signal if you're just trying to nudge things, long signal if you're really pushing. And again, I'm going to say this over and over again, but if the fundamentals aren't handled, neither one's really going to do anything. Now for some more morellins. Ipamorelin is next. This one is often used in conjunction with CJC. This one works through a different receptor pathway to stimulate GH release without significantly increasing other hormones like cortisol and prolactin, which are often associated with anything that stimulates your pituitary. That's why it's often considered cleaner than some of the other GH releasing peptides. Clean doesn't necessarily mean powerful. This one's going to be pretty subtle and again, very heavily dependent on context. So again, if growth hormone isn't the limiting factor in your life, stimulating it more isn't really going to do anything. People expecting crazy physique changes, getting shredded on ipamorelin alone are usually just misunderstanding what growth hormone actually does in your body. Next, we have tesamorelin. This one's different from most peptides because it actually has some real clinical validation. Again, growth hormone releasing hormone analog, again, going to increase endogenous growth hormone, and again, depends on a functioning pituitary to work. But where tesamorelin stands out is its effect on visceral fat, that fat around your organs. It's going to reduce deep abdominal fat, which again is strongly linked to insulin resistance, inflammation, cardiometabolic risk, and that's why improvements often show up in labs before they actually show up in the mirror with this peptide in particular. This one's also going to preserve lean mass a little bit better than a lot of other fat loss interventions, but it's not a general anti-aging peptide or a casual optimization tool. It's really going to depend on your own baseline function. So this was going to be more of a targeted metabolic intervention, not just a universal growth hormone booster. And I guess while we're on the morellins, there's a lot of confusion, so I'm just going to give you a quick breakdown of the difference between the three. Tesamorelin increases overall growth hormone and IGF-1 signaling with metabolic intent. Sermorelin supports normal GH production when it's slightly impaired. Ipamorelin lightly nudges GH pulses without significantly changing baseline input. Next, we have IGF-1 LR3, and this one's not a peptide in the signaling nudge sense. This one's an active growth factor analog. So unlike growth hormone peptides, which ask your pituitary to release more growth hormone, IGF-1 LR3 is going to act downstream of that, directly influencing cellular growth and nutrient uptake. So the way that the other growth hormone releasing analogs work, they increase growth hormone, which releases IGF-1 and increases that, which is the growth factor. This one is you're bypassing growth hormone and you're just supplementing with IGF-1 itself. So this one's going to be a bit more dramatic. Enhanced nutrient partitioning, fuller muscles, accelerated recovery are going to be common, but that same reason that it works is also why it can be risky. IGF-1 is not going to discriminate. It's going to promote growth everywhere in your body, not just your muscles and your gains. This could raise concerns around unwanted tissue growth, long-term safety, cancer risk, especially when you use it, recklessly or outside of medical supervision. So definitely be careful with this one, although it can be great. Next, we have MK677, and this one isn't technically a peptide, but it always shows up here, so I do want to address it. It's going to increase GH and IGF-1 by mimicking ghrelin signaling. As a result, it's going to increase appetite, water retention, and in some cases, insulin resistance if you are reckless. Some people love it. A lot of people don't really know what they're doing with it. Long-term trade-offs are going to be ignored with this one just because the short-term effects feel decently productive. Now we have the body composition and fat loss peptides. And the first category under this umbrella are the GLP-1 agonists. Basically what these are going to do, they're going to change your appetite and your food reward pathways in your brain. It's not going to directly burn fat. It's going to indirectly burn fat because it's going to reduce food noise. As a result, you're not going to be as hungry, not eating as much. As a result, you're in a calorie deficit, losing fat. That's how they help. And not all of them are going to be equal, so let's talk about the 3 most popular ones. First, of course, being semaglutide, which is Ozempic, Wegovy. Those are the brand name versions. And this one works on GLP-1 only. As a result, it's going to work on appetite suppression. It's going to blunt it. You might have some more GI side effects with this one, possibly nausea, constipation, diarrhea. Pretty well tolerated in most people. It's a baseline GLP-1 option, insufficient when appetite is the main bottleneck, but tolerance kind of builds up pretty quickly on this one. Next, we have tirzepatide, which works on GLP-1 and GIP. So this one works on 2 receptors. As a result, with this one, you're going to have that reduction of food noise, appetite suppression, but it's also going to increase your insulin sensitivity. As a result, maybe better fat loss and also tolerability with this. Usually fewer side effects than semaglutide from the people that I've worked with in my experience, and also often outperform semaglutide in terms of total amount of fat loss and also muscle retention as well. Next, we have retatrutide, which is the new hot thing, GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon on this one. This one is really interesting because it does work on glucagon. As a result, you just feel less crappy when you're in a calorie deficit. Might increase your energy expenditure, so burning more calories without really changing much because it's activating glucagon. As a result of activating glucagon, you might also have a little bit more energy when you are in that calorie deficit. It's going to be the most powerful one, but again, it's not going to be something that's casual and you just throw it in, and it's going to require a strategy for muscle preservation, usually just making sure you're getting enough protein and resistance training. And so again, let's just frame the difference between these 3. Semaglutide is intake reduction. Tirzepatide is intake plus metabolic handling. Retatrutide is intake reduction plus metabolism plus increasing your output. So of course, if you use one that has more leverage like retatrutide, you're also going to need to be a little bit more responsible. Next, we have tesofensine, and this one is a central appetite suppressant. It's not going to influence growth or metabolism at the tissue level. It's going to act on dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine pathways to suppress your appetite. Effect is pretty straightforward. You're going to be less hungry, food interest is going to fade, and calorie intake is going to fall. That leverage is going to drive fat loss, but it's going to come with trade-offs. Think of the sympathetic effects of increasing adrenaline in your body. Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, anxiety, not really being able to sleep. That's a big complaint, but these are the common complaints. Not really going to be too subtle. It's not going to improve your metabolic health. It's just going to overpower your appetite through your CNS. And that's what makes it very different from GLP-1 agonists, which improve appetite regulation and insulin signaling simultaneously. This one's just a short-term appetite suppressant. Wouldn't really use this one long-term, if at all. Next, we have AOD 9604 and GH fragments. These are also marketed pretty aggressively for fat loss because they're fragments of growth hormone thought to influence lipolysis without systemic GH effects. So if you think of growth hormone, it's like a protein in your body. One part of it does one thing, one part of it does another thing. These are fragments, so the fragment that specifically induces lipolysis, you're taking that out and injecting that specifically. The effects are going to be pretty modest at best. If someone's already lean, already dialed in, doing everything else right, this may slightly tilt the equation, but if you're struggling to lose fat, this is not going to be the missing link. There's a whole lot of other things that you can be doing to improve upon here. Anyway, moving on. Now we have the cognitive and neurological peptides. Let's start with Semax. Semax influences dopaminergic and neurotrophic pathways in your brain and is often described as improving focus, motivation, or stress resilience. I like this one. I've used it. Short-term effects are very common. Don't really get too much in the long term. Kind of poorly understood. The brain is going to be extremely good at normalizing new signals. What feels profound in week 1 might feel baseline by week 4. So this is going to be something that you're going to use on and off. It's not something that you just take all the time, a cycle of like 12 weeks. It's more so just, hey, I need to work this afternoon. Let's lock in a little bit more. And that's where this one really shines. Similar with Selenk, often discussed in conjunction with Semax, but this one skews a little bit more anxiolytic and stress modulating effects. So it just makes you feel a little bit more chill, which could be helpful for someone with high baseline anxiety or stress reactivity. People who are already calm often feel it just a little. And again, context is going to decide everything. I have used this one. I prefer Semax. Next, of course, is dihexa. This one is one of the more aggressive cognitive peptides. And this one's due to its effects on synaptogenesis in preclinical models, basically the creation of new links in your brain. And this is exactly where risk tolerance should go up. Potent effects on neural connectivity are not inherently or good or bad, but they are very powerful. I probably wouldn't touch this one just because of some of the risks on cancer that I kind of would rather avoid, but it is pretty good for healing your brain, or so I see and think. So again, your mileage may vary. Next, we have the immune and inflammation peptides, and I'm just going to talk about one, which is thymosin alpha 1, or TA1. This is one of the more actually legitimate peptides in the space. It's going to modulate immune function rather than, indiscriminately stimulate it. So again, this category has potential if you use it right, but if you use it sloppy, it's going to create real problems. An overactive immune system isn't necessarily always a good thing and not a win. It's not going to be a wellness toy. This is going to be a medical tool. So probably, again, wouldn't really use this unless you're really, really convinced and did a lot of research. Next, we have the mitochondrial peptides. These are often talked about as longevity cheat codes, but they're just kind of metabolic stress signals in a way. They're not going to make your mitochondria magically stronger. The powerhouse of the cell is going to still be the powerhouse of the cell. It's not going to be even more of a powerhouse of the cell. It's just going to change how your cells respond to energy demand, oxidative stress, and insulin signaling. And that's why they're interesting. But again, don't expect obvious immediate effects with these. Starting with MOTS-c, this one's probably the most well-known mitochondrial peptide just because it ties together exercise, insulin sensitivity, and metabolic flexibility. So MOTS-c is going to increase in response to metabolic stress like exercise or caloric restriction. Its role is going to be improving how cells handle energy under stress, again, by enhancing insulin sensitivity and glucose utilization. So basically, where are the nutrients in your bloodstream going after you experience stress? So MOTS-c isn't going to increase your energy in like a stimulant sense. You're not going to feel more amped like you might with tesofensine, for example. This one's going to be something where effects are going to show up indirectly. Better exercise tolerance, improved metabolic markers, sometimes easier body composition changes when the basics are already handled. Just basically makes your metabolism a bit more efficient. Next, we have SS31, or elameprotide. Probably mispronounced that. This one's going to be pretty conceptually different from MOTS-c. Rather than changing your metabolic signaling broadly, this is going to target the mitochondrial membrane itself. Specifically, something called cardiolipin, which is involved in electron transport and oxidative phosphorylation, taking you back to college level chemistry. So in simpler terms, SS31 is going to be improving mitochondrial efficiency and reducing oxidative stress. That's why it's going to be studied more in aging, where your mitochondria get less powerful. Cardiovascular disease, where your mitochondria aren't working as good. So it's not really going to be something physique or performance related. And again, people expecting noticeable performance enhancement this one are going to be very underwhelmed. This one's probably going to shine more in older individuals or those with impaired mitochondrial function, where small efficiency gains can really meaningfully help with something like fatigue or just being resilient. Next, we have humanin, or humanin. I don't know how to pronounce any of these. Pronunciation isn't my strong suit. I knew Greek before I knew English. This one is one of the earliest discovered mitochondrial-derived peptides, and is linked to cell survival and anti-apoptotic signaling. This role is going to be more protective instead of enhancing. It's going to help your cells resist stressors like metabolic insult or some oxidative damage. This is going to make it more interesting from a longevity and disease resistance perspective, but not particularly exciting for something like a performance or physique standpoint. So MOTS-c is more metabolic adaptation, SS31 is mitochondrial efficiency, and humanin is cellular preservation. All right, so that's most of the ones I wanted to go over. Again, most peptides live in this weird gray zone. There's inconsistent purity, there's research only labeling made in some dude's bathtub, minimal long-term data on a lot of these. But that doesn't mean that they're useless. It means that they're going to demand a lot of restraint and context, more research, more education. The culture around peptides rewards experimentation, necessarily outcomes, and I do think that is backwards. And truthfully, if a compound truly transformed health in a predictable way, you better believe Big Pharma would be capitalizing on it. It wouldn't really rely on anecdotes, forums, and Discord servers to survive. But again, I do think that a lot of these are going to be more commonplace in the next 10 years. Big Pharma is going to, capture a lot of them, make a big profit like they do. So keep your eyes out for those. We shall see how it goes. So again, who are peptides actually for? They make sense for older people, high-performing individuals who have already handled the basics, people with real injuries, real labs, and real constraints. They're not going to make sense for a beginner. They're not going to do much. If you're looking for a shortcut, probably not going to do much. You're going to waste a few $100 because they are pretty expensive. Nothing's going to replace discipline. If you haven't really earned that right to optimize, optimization tools won't save you. All right, thank you for watching this video. Let me know if you found this informative or if you want to see any other deep dives on the specific ones a little bit more in depth, any other reviews. I am an open book. I'll tell you everything I know. See ya. All right, like, comment, subscribe.